We have 3 different cats with 3 very different personalities, and each of them has a different style of carrier that works best for them. Now, I thought I'd take a few minutes to share what has worked for us in our cat carrier journey, because we've learned this through a lot of trial and error, and we've also learned the extreme importance of having a cat be comfortable in their carrier. Having a carrier that you know your cat is comfortable in goes so much farther than matters of convenience when taking them to the vet or whatnot. If you have a cat sitter or are in an emergency situation where you need to evacuate very quickly, you do not want to waste precious time struggling and fighting your cat to get into the carrier. So this is what we've learned and what works best for our cats. This sweet girl, Gandalf, is the bravest thing you've ever met when she's at home, but oh my goodness, she does not like being transported anywhere. It stresses her out, and by proxy, it stresses us out. This is what we use for her. Now, for a long time, we had tried to use soft carriers for all of them, but the issue with using something like this with a cat who really, really hates being in a carrier, Dave's like, oh, what's in there? Is that the process of getting them in can be very difficult and can ultimately make the situation worse. What I mean by that is if you have a cat who's really nervous and agitated and you're trying to get them in, you have to, at some point, attempt to zip the closure. And as you're attempting to fasten the closure, especially if you're doing this by yourself, it gives the cat an opportunity to sneak a paw out of whichever portion you haven't closed or to try to scramble back out. And what ultimately ends up with that kind of situation is you're trying to hold the cat in, the cat's struggling, you might get scratched, the cat's gonna be more stressed out, you're gonna be more stressed out, and it's just not gonna be a good experience for anyone. So that is why we decided to get Gandalf, something that was just a lot simpler and easier to manage. The benefit of a hard shell case like this, first and foremost, is that it's bigger and it's also unyielding. A cat can't really sneak their paw out of something like this, can you, Gandalf, the way they can through a partially opened zip closure. What also makes this a little easier is you can tilt it up like that, have the cat slide in, and then you can close it without too much struggle or fuss. Before we started using the hard shell carrier for Gandalf, every single time we had to get her ready for the vet or to be moved from one place to the next was kind of a traumatic experience. And, you know, as that continues to happen over time, it's just going to make her more and more resistant to being put into a carrier in the first place, which just makes everything worse for all parties involved. So that's what works for our travel adverse Gandalf. Now let's talk about Dave. Next up, we have Dave, who is a lot less carrier averse than his sister, but still isn't always the easiest boy on the planet to put into a carrier. This is the one we use for him. This backpack style is super helpful for a number of different reasons, the first of which for us is convenience. If either Jackson or myself has to move all 3 cats on our own, being able to have one in each hand and one on your back simplifies the matter and creates fewer trips that we have to take. I love the design of this one because it opens up right from the side. I think that's residue of a treat, ignore that. And Dave oftentimes will actually just kind of go in of his own volition. And if he doesn't just insert himself, it's pretty easy to just kind of guide him in there and then close this flap. Something I will note, because we have tried a few different backpacks, there are 2 features of this that I think are really important for you to look for when you're choosing your carrier. The first is this leash attachment. Now, if we're transporting our cats with their harnesses on, this can fasten right on to the metal ring on the back of their harnesses, which adds another layer of security and protection to the carrier. And the second thing I want to point out are these clasps on the zippers themselves. These are present on every zipper that the carrier has, and they just add an extra level of security, which is especially helpful if you have a cat that squirms a lot or is very wriggly or could potentially get a paw out and kind of shimmy the zippers open. When those things are clasped, the zipper can move as a unit, but it can't actually create an opening much larger than, I don't know, what is that, like an inch, which the cat would have to be very small to get out of. So I like that closure and that leash on this style of carrier, but not all backpack carriers have them. So definitely good to look for. Dave is a lot less likely to fight the process of being put in a carrier than Gandalf, and he also enjoys sitting up when he's in a carrier as opposed to lying down, so this is a really good option for him. Last but not least, we have Natia, and Natia is the perfect cat in every way, and she's the easiest one for us to get into carriers. For her, we like to use this. You can plop her in from the top, you can open one of these guys and let her in, and it's really just pretty easy to do every time. The benefit of a carrier like this, as you can tell from the mesh, it's breathable, it's comfy, it's soft, and it's also really good for traveling because it compresses so nicely. While carriers like this are just by their very nature going to take up a lot more floor space, garage space, what have you, something like this can unzip and flatten down very well, making it super easy to store. With the sides unzipped, this is what it looks like. As you can see, it folds up pretty darn flat. That part can come out. You could slide it under a couch, a bed, whatever. Does not take up very much space at all. So there you have it. Those are our 3 carriers and what works for us. If you have a super travel averse cat, I would recommend something like that, while these 2 soft options are different styles you can choose for cats that are a little bit easier to move from one place to the next. If you guys have any other recommendations of different styles you've tried, drop them in the comments and let me know.